There'll be a little. Okay, so tonight's guest speaker is Dr. Nolan Bunting. Nolan is a veterinarian serving southern Wyoming and northern Colorado. He's a certified animal first responder for wildfires and other disasters, and trained extensively in wildlife medicine and forensics. He currently works in Cheyenne and as a concierge veterinarian for invertebrates, reptiles, and fish. And I will add, Nolan is also the chair of our programs committee, for which we're grateful. So without further ado, I'm going to hand the stage over to Dr. Nolan Bunting. Moving forward, backwards.
Got it. Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Nolan Bunting. You guys can just call me Nolan. I don't like to be called doctor outside the office, but that's part of my presentation title. I just want to confirm, am I in the camera shot? Ish. Good, okay. Move a little closer to it.
You stay.
All right, okay. Just want to double check. So hello, everyone. Welcome to this presentation. I hope that I am both educational as well as willing to answer all your questions. So part of the goal I have for today is that there's going to be a lot of different question breaks to kind of answer questions. As we go through the presentation, you'll see like a little thing that says questions for part 1, part 2, and part 3. As we get to those questions, I will be taking like 3 questions kind of midway, and then of course there'll be time for questions at the end. Today I'm presenting on a topic near and dear to my heart, and that is the caring and triage of wild birds. So who here has ever found an injured bird in their yard? Who here has ever found an injured bird at all? That means like anyone, most people have seen an injured bird of some kind, but that's surprising with the yard. It's very common for us to find an injured bird. Now, who here has tried to help that injured bird? Who here had a hard time trying to find resources online about how to help an injured bird? It is one of the hardest things to do is find the resources you need to understand exactly what you do. And there's a lot of mythologies and things that have been kind of said over the years that we're going to try to correct as we go. What I'm going to be presenting to you today is the current like updated protocol for Cornell University, as well as Michigan State University. If you didn't know, Michigan State is actually one of the leading in raptor rehab centers in the United States. So they set up a lot of the animal bird triage. Really quickly, sadly, my co-host couldn't be here with me, but that is my co-host up there. That is Stumpy. He is our Swainson Hawk ambassador. He is missing his right wing. He accidentally got wound up in barbed wire and now lives comfortably at our clinic as a wonderful ambassador animal. He doesn't like being an ambassador animal. He hates everyone, which is one of the reasons that he didn't come with me tonight, because I didn't want him living in my house overnight with my cats. But he's here in spirit, and he's going to kind of walk through some of our other rehab species, as well as kind of go through our presentation. Yep. Oh, there it is. So quickly about myself, I work mostly at Cheyenne Pet Clinic, as well as that bottom left-hand corner for you guys. That's our Marvelous Critters veterinarian. I work as a veterinarian for small animals at a small animal practice that also sees wildlife and does wildlife rehab. That's Cheyenne Pet Clinic, as well as I'm concierge veterinarian, meaning you can call me out and I will come out to see invertebrates or exotics in your home. So if you have any parrots or things like that and want a veterinary care, just reach out to me later. I was trained in rehab by the Sea Life Center of Seward, Alaska, as well as my hometown of Homer, Alaska in the bottom right-hand corner. I went to school at Colorado State University, where I majored in zoology and then transferred into the CSU veterinary program. I also went to University of Florida, where I graduated with a master's in conservation and wildlife forensics. So I am a very well-rounded individual. I'm also one of the veterinary first responders with the Veterinary Medical Reserve Corps. So I'm one of the people that responds to wildfire incidences here, and part of my job is helping wildlife move, which is a very fun job to have. But anyway, moving on. Talking about today's layout. There are 3 parts, as I said. The first part is prepping for the worst. So this is the idea of this presentation, is to get you guys prepared for what you need to have for an emergency if you have wildlife in your household or come across an injured wildlife. So part of that is going to be building your kit, and as well as going over the safety precautions that you need to take for yourself. Many of times, the most common thing that happens to us is I get people that get injured by wildlife, and they call me as part of the, well, I had this one person come up to me with a raccoon, and he goes, hey, so does it matter if I got bit by the raccoon as I was bringing it in? I get that question a lot. Sounds like a weird question, but animals will injure you because they are scared and they don't know you. And when they're scared and don't know you, their first response is to attack. So we're going to go over kind of PPE and how to protect yourself. After that, we're going to go into part 2, which is specific incidences. So these are the most common ones that I tried to describe. Obviously, I don't have the time to teach you all of bird injury and triage. So we're going to focus primarily on window strikes, abandoned birds, cat attacks, and hypothermia. These are the top 4 things I see at my clinic, as well as the top 4 things I see in wildlife rehab. Gotta make sure I'm still in the camera shot. Sorry, I like to move around a lot, so that's my own weakness. And the third part is other ways to help. I always like to include this in my wildlife presentations, just kind of going over bird feeders, habitat building, and stewardship. I'm assuming that we're all ready to begin, so I'm going to get started. Starting off, talking about building a kit. This is probably one of the most important things that you guys could have in your car / in your house. When you're dealing with wildlife, having a kit that has all the things you need makes it really easy. My kit is that rolling suitcase over there. In that kit, I have my personal protective equipment, my glasses, my gown, my little waist belt with all my veterinary tools. My kit's a little bit more extensive than the kit you guys need. So what I tried to highlight is the things that you might need. I'm going to try to keep this in the camera, but I'm going to do my best. So starting off, my biggest recommendation for everybody to have is some form of animal transport. My go-to is a shoebox. I love shoe boxes. They're great. The other one I really like for songbirds and little passerines is brown paper bags. Work really well for animal transport. They're very gentle. They're very soft. So when you have like a little tiny bird that's more likely to get injured, they're less likely to move around in this space and are more likely to be kind of cuddled and snuggled by this area. Brown paper bags are also great for heat absorption, which we're going to kind of cover a little bit down the line in the next part, which is heating supplies. Obviously, these don't work when you have very, very large animals, right? So I always have like a cage kennel or another dog crate, or my most common is my cat crate. I have 5 cat crates currently in the back of my car at all times. I put everything from a goose to a raccoon to a very, very angry squirrel in them. They are great, they're cheap, and they're easily to find on Facebook Marketplace for like $15. So highly recommend them. One of the other things I like about them is that they're easy to cover and make into a dark thing with a towel. So that way you don't have to, animals, as we cover them and make it dark, they tend to calm down a lot more, even in the case of injury. So that's one of the most important things to do. Now, talking about, these are very important, but the other part you need is a heating supply. Really quickly. One of the things that I like for boxes, boxes are very flat surfaces. So they're not great for birds that are passerines, like our trees and shrub birds. They don't like standing up flat on the ground. So one of the things that I like to recommend is making a little mini perch. I did this with 2 buttons and a straw and a hot glue gun. It's a little tiny perch that you put inside your box. So that way they have something to sit on and perch up on. Because that's mostly how they like to rest. Talking about heating supplies. Yeah, I gotta stay in the shot, I believe, for a second. Oh my gosh, this stuff's heavy. So, if you're a professional like me and you're triaging animals at your home, you might get yourself an incubator. This is actually a reptile egg incubator that I've modified for birds. It allows me to get to temperatures of 120 degrees. Not necessarily needed for birds, but very helpful for sick reptiles. But birds specifically have very high body temperatures. So their body temperatures are about 105. So they're very prone to hypothermia in a regular box. So it's very important to give them a heating supply. One of the most common things that happens with shock patients, Sorry, I'm getting way ahead of my presentation. I'll try not to do that. But heating supplies are very important. At home, you might have a hot water bottle. Love these because again, all you have to do is take this and put it on the bottom or the top of your box or on the bottom of your bag. If you're fancy as well, these are like those weird pillows that you put over your ears when you have an ear infection to like be like a heated pillow. Very cheap. The cords are very old, so they're definitely not grounded, but they heat up very nicely and you can kind of put them down underneath, like again, a box or a pillow or things like that to keep it warm. The next one is medical equipment. Ideally, you don't have a lot of this because hopefully you get this animal to a rehab center or triage place before you need to do, actual medical things. But things that I recommend having are bandaging material because it's very nice to splint or hold a wing if it's broken. The other one that I really recommend is saline spray. We'll go into why I recommend saline spray. Chlorhexidine is a fancy scrub. Again, we'll get into why we're going to want chlorhexidine. A thermometer and sugar water. Sugar water is great for the hypoglycemic birds because all you have to do is put it on their tongue and it gets absorbed by their tongue. So you don't need to try to have them swallow it, which makes life a lot easier because you're not going to aspirate them. Little sugar water. I'm a big fan of Caro syrup. I like Caro syrup the best because you just can put it on your finger and then put it there. And then I always recommend having cutting tools. I'm going to just look over and make sure I'm still in the shot. Okay, good. So many different cutting tools exist. My personal favorite is like a good 14 wire cutters. I've used these to cut so many different things and cut so many animals out of different things that these are my favorite tool that I have in my car. A lot of people question why I have bolt cutters, but these are very important for like barbed wire, things that you might get wrapped up on, right? Because when you're trying to get an animal that's running around in pain out of barbed wire, I've definitely, won't deny, I once tried to get, I did successfully get him out, but it took a while, a coyote with barbed wire using this, which the coyote was trying to kill me. And I was trying to get around the leg of the coyote with this. So it was literally this in my wonderful little meat shield gloves of my welding gloves. Never go home without welding gloves. These are really cheap. They save your hands. They save your body parts. They're like 20 bucks. You can't go wrong without them. Towels are also really nice because you could throw them over the head of a very angry animal and they tend to calm down a little bit. And then of course my headlamp. For me, I always have a hard time having stuff on my head because I wear glasses when I'm working on animals. So I have a little neck lamp. Oops, sorry about that. Blind people. But a little neck lamp that goes around my neck. So that way I can keep my hands free, but also not have it up on my head where it's bouncing around a lot. Yeah, it's very nice when you're trying to dodge things too, because this will stay like this when you're kind of pulling back or trying to move your head out of the way. Ask me how I know. Sorry, I got a lot of jokes like that throughout the presentation. It's not going to be any better. I also like eyewear. I recommend this highly when working with corvids. Crows always go for the eyes. They will always aim for your eyes when you're working with them. Don't ask, I know probably why, but at the same time, it's not a fun experience to be sitting there working with a crow and it's trying to peck your eyes out while you're trying to hold its wing in one direction. So talking about your own personal protective, as you can see from this wonderful news reporter in Australia, animals are dangerous. She was told that koalas had vicious, venomous fangs and was put in all this gear to work around koalas. I will not deny that I've definitely worn many of a gear like this, depending on what I'm working with. So for sure, welding gloves are a big part of what I use, right? These are nice, thick, and hard. If I have a small pastern, however, I can't feel that little bird, so I might damage the little bird. So for the little tiny birds, I like either nitrile gloves, like the little blue gloves that you wear, latex gloves work just as well, or using gardening gloves. All of those kind of equipment for gloves work very well. Protective eyewear, wear what you're comfortable with. Some people like goggles, some people like glasses. I'm a glasses guy because I like if something bumps it out of my way, it bumps it out of the way. Versus a mask, it's going to take me with it. Some people wear those cool like face shield masks, both work. I always wear like a facial mask, like what we wore during COVID, just for kind of like the human disease aspect of what I do. We'll get into kind of some of the diseases that wildlife can transfer and why we wear a mask. Very important. Wear a mask. I know it sounds dumb because you're like, well, there's no way this can hurt me. Things can hurt you. Hand sanitizer, obviously, for before and after, because you don't want to transfer your germs to the animal. So using hand sanitizer before you interact and then after you interact is a very important step. Towels or gowns. I wear this wonderful leather apron when I'm working around raptors and other birds. Reason being is that it's thick, hardy, and if somebody tries to grab it, it just goes like this instead of getting my wonderful chest. If you don't have a leather apron, I have found like thick cotton aprons work, taking a towel and wrapping a towel around you. Just whatever you can to give yourself an additional layer of protection on your chest. Obviously closed-toed shoes, preferably boots. This is my little spiel that you can have a lot of pretty things, but remember that all of it gets washed with bleach. This used to be a wonderful red towel. It is now a wonderful beige towel. Everything gets washed with bleach after we're done with it. So that's a very important step to prevent that animal from spreading disease, you from accidentally spreading it to other animals. So whatever you like, don't buy expensive things because they're going to get ruined by the bleach. I don't care what bleach you do, they always get ruined. Okay. Talking about your hazards. There's a lot of diseases that birds carry. This is just the list of diseases from birds. I'm not going to go into mammals, which is another giant list, but we are going to talk about the bird diseases. So the most common things that get you sick, I've had the majority of these at one point or another. Salmonella and E. coli. These guys are very messy. You know, they don't clean themselves. I mean, they clean themselves, but they don't take baths or scrub with soap and water. So whenever you're working around a bird, there's always a chance you're going to get salmonella. Speaking from a lot of experience, E. coli is very common too, as is other bacterial diseases that can cause a lot of gastrointestinal upset. Another reason to wear that wonderful mask, so that way the little things don't fly into your mouth. One of the other things that we talked about this year specifically, and actually it's really affected my clinic a lot because my clinic had to shut down seeing certain bird species because of it, which is high-path avian influenza. So as you guys know already, or maybe have heard, we're currently in an outbreak of high-path avian influenza here in the United States. That has jumped to people. It has jumped to cats, which is one of the reasons we can't have high-path avian influenza birds in our clinic, is because we can't have our clinic cats getting sick. So it's a very important one. We're going to kind of go over that one a little bit more in depth. Pigeons, whenever you rescue a pigeon, know that they are the biggest carrier of chlamydia. Yep, it's very common to get chlamydia from pigeons. So I want you to know that. As a man that's gotten chlamydia from a pigeon, it's a very important one to know. Mycobacterium is a skin disease that you get from corvids. It's very rare here in this part of the state because we're too dry, but it is kind of moving in as our climate has changed. Finally is West Nile virus. We as humans don't have to worry about handling a bird and getting West Nile virus. We can only get West Nile virus from a mosquito biting the bird and the mosquito biting us. That being said, it's important to recognize West Nile virus so that way when you're going to a rehabber, you're not transmitting it. That's a very neurological bird that's kind of like bouncing off the wall, trying to things. The problem is it looks a lot like a concussed bird. So if you bring it to a rehabber, they'll know exactly what they're looking for. And then of course, physical injuries with birds. This is a battledore hawk. This was back when I worked in a rehab center in Africa. This one really liked to use his beak to try to tear open clothes. He was very fascinated by them. He was very nice about it, but there are many pointy objects in a bird's possession, from beaks to talons, and even one of my largest scars on my hand came from a crow that I decided not to wear gloves with and decided to bite me down on the finger. Gave me a nice, wonderful little cross-shaped scar. So Again, personal protective equipment for you and your animals. High-path avian influenza. If you see this, you will know pretty quickly as it's very deadly to birds. So it's one of those ones that birds will die within 24 to 48 hours of contracting this disease. So it's one of those ones that oftentimes what you hear is like you go, I rescued a bird that was they start off kind of neurologic, kind of wandering around. They might have their neck coiled up like this towards their body. And then when they start kind of having a little bit of nasal discharge or things like that, that's a good sign that you don't want to be anywhere near that bird. So if its head's coiled up towards its body and it's had nasal discharge, that's probably a high-path avian influenza bird. Sadly, it'll likely die really quickly because, again, this is one of the most deadly diseases in birds currently. We don't know the numbers in wild birds, but we know the numbers in currently domesticated birds. We've lost something like 12, close to 12. Oh my gosh, the number went up really high. I think it's like 220 million birds in the last 2 years in the domesticated side. I know that in the wildlife side, for what we've correlated, it's been about 250,000 to 1 million. Based on just the research that we've been able to do. Because again, we can't go out and collect all the dead birds. So yeah. Part 1 questions. I'll take 3 questions at this time. Feel free. Ask as much as you can.
My backyard farm.
From high-path avian influenza? Yeah, so currently the biggest recommendation for high-path avian influenza protection is 1, make sure you're constantly changing that water. So you never want to have water sitting more than 24 hours with this current disease, because if a wild bird that has it is drinking out of your water in any way or form, there's a good chance that it can spread the disease. 2, trying to limit that bird's ability to, actually, I think it's actually on this. Add wildlife deterrents. So basically stop feeding wild birds and things like that near your flock. You know, I know it's hard because you're like, I love feeding the birds, but you got to protect chickens. It's a very hard choice. So you got to make sure that you're doing something to deter wildlife. That includes feral cats as well, because feral cats are now carriers of this disease too, alongside dairy cows. Yeah, it's jumping quite a lot, actually. I like fencing materials, very good. So like little tiny fences like chicken wire, just to prevent other birds from getting in. Luckily, it still needs a lot of like close contact. So like needs like a good 3 feet to kind of spread. It is a respiratory disease, so it goes fast. But if you can try to prevent that spread, you're going to make a bigger barrier. Yep. That's high path. Hi.
Has that jumped to people?
Oh, yes. In the state of Wyoming, we've had 3 confirmed cases. In the state of Colorado, I believe we've had 5. All within dairy farmers. It's a bad day to be a dairy farmer.
Is there a cause, or is it unknown what causing it, or?
Oh, we already know. It's a very specific influenza virus. So it's a very specific virus that's been causing it. The problem is that, long story short, it ended up here in 2020, 2021, 2022. No one knows for sure. And then it just spread through our wild bird population, which then allowed it to spread through our domestic bird population. And now that wild birds are very commonly having it, it's spreading to our dairy cows because wild birds love dairy cows, such as grackles and cowbirds and those kind of things. Yes. Ironically, for this wonderful little thing that was put out, they chose a northern flicker. Northern flickers have not been reported to have this disease, and none of the woodpeckers have. But that's the picture they chose, which is hilarious. They could have chosen any of the common ones, but they chose a woodpecker.
Footwear and HPA.
Ooh, yes. So one of my biggest recommendations right now, and this is going to sound like a weird thing, everyone should be bleaching their shoes whenever they go from one natural area to the other. I'm a big advocate for that. I know it ruins your shoes, but you have to realize that standing water is one of the leading places that it is. It's mostly in our waterfowl population. So when all of our natural areas are mostly ponds and lakes and things like that, you can bring this disease on your shoe from one pond to another pond. As we get closer to winter, this is when the most wild birds die because all that water shrinks in capacity and all the waterfowl are all together in one spot. This is the time of year that none of us really like high path avian influenza from a wildlife standpoint, because this is when we get roughly 85 to 90% of the cases we see is from like late November to mid-February.
Can you use a spray to spray your shoes?
You can use a spray too.
Kind of good.
Yeah, you basically always want something with a large quantity of alcohol or bleach. So, yep, alcohol is a little bit nicer. It's just hard to find nice spray alcohol. But the go-to brand I like is called Rescue. Works really well. It also doesn't ruin too much of the clothes.
Is there? See?
Working on it. I think there's one in a trial thing right now. They're currently just trying to figure out if it's things. Huh?
Finish your answer.
Just the other question, caution to take if a bird with avian flu is found in your yard.
Call CPW. I know it sounds like a weird thing to say, but that's my go-to thing to say is, you need to don on some very strong protective equipment, not necessarily for yourself, but so that way you don't spread it around. The odds of you having a high path avian influenza bird in your yard that isn't a chicken is very slim. Sadly, most of the birds that die of high path avian influenza that are songbirds and passerines get eaten pretty quickly in the environment. It's one of the reasons that raptors have high path avian influenza is because they love eating the things that get it. Have you ever, yeah, I think we have a recorded lecture on high path avian influenza if anyone wants to watch from last year. Or not last year, 2 years ago? I don't remember when Heather did her talk, but.
I don't remember if we did record.
Oh, okay. Anyway, that's sadly all the time I had for questions in part 1. We're gonna move on to part 2 before I run out of time, so I have to keep running. This is a bald eagle. He's gonna be talking a little bit about window strikes and blunt force. He got hit by a wind turbine. So he was flying through a wind farm and got slammed to the ground. He broke this wing and that wing and his pelvis, I believe. He is actually, I think he had a surgery done by CSU, so he's actually doing pretty good. At least from what I've been told. I haven't actually checked up on it. I should probably do that. So part 2, specific and quick conditions. We're going to talk about window strikes and blunt force injuries, abandoned birds, cat attacks, and hypothermia. Talking about window strikes. As you can see, the birds don't like window strikes, and there's a lot of protests going on about it. Up to 1 billion birds per year will die on windows alone, to our knowledge. That is a very large number. I also like to include that cars and wind turbines are my most common injury from raptor perspective of why I have raptors come to my clinic. They get hit by a car or they get hit by a wind turbine. Right now, they're about even, actually. It's 50-50. There's a lot of wind farms up in Cheyenne, and they fly through, and those wind turbines, despite looking very slow, are actually moving at about 150 miles per hour. So the bird looks at them and thinks they're moving slow, but in reality, they're moving very, very fast. So they try to go through, and yeah. It's one of those ones where, as a bird activist, I'm not a big fan of wind energy right now because of the number of injuries I see. They're working on trying to improve it, but they haven't figured out a way yet. And the problem is they put wind turbines directly where raptors love to migrate because it's nice, open, flat terrain with lots of areas to eat prey items. And they also put them at the height that they like to fly when they're soaring, because that's where the thermals and the winds are that help push birds as they go. Back to what we were saying. So let's say a bird hits your window, ba-boom, and you hear that wonderful little sound. First thing you always need to do is go look for the bird. Oftentimes, if it's like a very sudden hit, they've hit it and they've fallen directly down to the ground. That happens 50% of the time. The other 50%, they've hit it and they bounce off into the nearest bush or shrub or things like that so they can hide and then they sometimes lose consciousness in that bush or shrub. So when you find that bird, it's a very hard thing because you got to figure out, because you don't know what bird hit your window, you don't know what species. So it's kind of looking around. Oftentimes when you find a bird unconscious, sadly, I don't get to fall over backwards, but they oftentimes are on their back. That is because as birds fly towards a window, they either hit their head or they try to brace themselves, seeing that as a reflection of the last minute, and twist their legs up and try to slam their legs into the wall. Those are the two areas that get mostly injured, is they either get really concussed or they break a bottom leg. As you kind of going through this, we do our ABCs. Who here has taken an EMT course and knows what the ABCs are? Airway, breathing, circulation. Yep. So whenever you're looking at a bird that has gotten hit in the head, quickly open its mouth, make sure it doesn't have anything like dirt or things, because it might have hit the ground and then fallen in the dirt with its mouth open. So make sure that airway is clear. Oftentimes clear it with a little cotton swab or something like that to kind of scoop out the area. 2, breathing. When you have an unconscious bird, birds are practically impossible to see breathing because they have these wonderful air sacs. But one of the things you can see if they're doing really deep respirations, like they're having a hard time breathing. So when you get that, and you're seeing that whole bird move, that's a good sign that he is kind of in shock and he's really injured. Circulation. Birds' heartbeats are about 240 beats per minute to up to 300 beats per minute. You're never going to be able to count it. You're never going to be able to feel it. Just assume that it's there. One of the best tricks, and this was taught to me by a wildlife rehabber, if you don't know if a bird is dead on impact or unconscious on impact, move their legs. If their legs can move, they are unconscious. If their legs can't move, they have died. Because birds are the fastest creatures to go into rigor mortis. That is where that stiff board-like feature is, like when you die, your body rigors up and tenses. Birds, that occurs within 10 to 15 minutes after dying. So it's a great indicator for if that bird passed away. So if you have any movement in that leg, that means you have an unconscious bird. Then we get into what to do next. So, paper bag, box, you want to put them in a dark location. The darker the better. The more sensory light they have, the more likely they are going to have issues kind of as they wake up. And then you want to get them as warm as possible. Again, birds' body temperature is 105. When they go into a concussion, they start going hypothermic rather quickly. So one of the biggest mistakes is that we grab the bird, we take the bird inside, and we leave it kind of like where our house is warm. That is not warm enough. Ideally, a bird should be at least around 85 to 90 degrees around them. So if you have like a very warm furnace room, one of my favorite places to put a bird, or you use like a heating pad, or as I use my incubator and then I cover them with a tarp. Again, you want them as warm as possible. That's one of the biggest mistakes that causes them issues, because if their temperature goes down, their heart slows down, and then they're more likely to have traumatic injury afterwards. Once they are there, you're going to kind of wait and listen for about 2 hours. Do not try to like open the box and take a look or do anything like that. Just leave the box, leave the bag, and you're going to listen for that bird starting to move around. He will start moving around pretty quickly as soon as the concussion wears off. One of the biggest mistakes that we talk about as well is never give any food or water in the box at all. I know it's tempting to help the animal, but for 24 hours, that bird should not eat and that bird should not drink, because it's one of the most common ways to get aspiration is because they're concussed. They try to drink water, and then instead of going down to their stomach, it goes into their lungs and heart or circulatory system. So no water, no food for 24 hours. I know it's tempting. You have the bird seed right there. I've definitely been the guy that's like, maybe I should try, but it's best not to. Okay. As the bird gets better, you can start kind of feeling it to see like if it has any broken bones or injuries. Most of the time, luckily enough, if it survives, it's just mostly a concussion is the most common injury. Again, there's a chance for broken legs or broken wings. The way you tell a bird with a broken leg is they hold that leg up and they kind of hold it in air while the other one sits down and they try to waddle back and forth. It's very easy to feel a broken bone on a little bird because you'll just feel it and you'll feel like a little dent in the leg. Where that little dent is when there's mostly a long bone there, that's likely a break. If there is a break, ideally we send them to a hospital rehab center. We assess the injuries and do the care. That being said, there's very limited rehab centers currently for small birds, which we'll get to in part 3. So we'll get there as we go. But talking about reducing, again, there was a great presentation that was giving it. Screen or other blockers of reflection, trimming the trees or moving feeders away from your house so they're not as close. Keeping the lights off after it gets dark because there are nocturnal birds that love to slam into windows throughout the night. Owls are very prone to slamming windows that are open, like if the light's on in a house, they're very good at flying into it, especially on like full moon nights when it's reflecting off. Yep, and then just kind of monitoring. There are great websites where you can actually submit that you found a dead bird. I love those websites, and you can actually be like, hey, these are the buildings that we noticed around town that are starting to get really strong bird hits. I forget exactly what that website's called, but somebody in the audience probably knows. D-Bird, right? Yeah.
D-Bird.
D-Bird, not E-Bird, but D-Bird. Okay, talking about abandoned birds. This is my most common call that I get as a veterinarian. I have found an abandoned bird. The mother is nowhere to be found. I won't deny Mike from Rocky Mountain Raptor Program does not like me when I bring down a bird that is literally just a fledgling that is waiting for its mom and mom's trying to teach it to be independent. And somebody comes out of nowhere and picks it up and brings it to my clinic. It happens very often. And it's also the most common call that rehabilitators have. So we are not mothers, much like this dog. And because of that, we like to make sure we triage it as help. And if you can educate others on this, this would be great. Again, this is the most common call. So assess if the bird is actively needing rescue or truly abandoned. Very rarely is a bird truly abandoned. Whenever you find a nest or things like that, or a fledgling bird on the ground, try to monitor it for at least 24 hours. Raptors specifically have been known to leave for like 48 hours and then come back later to see if their fledgling has decided to pick up and leave. So make sure you're kind of assessing. If you have a nest that falls out of a tree, do not pick up that nest and bring it to me. I have gotten so many nests this season. I think I thought about actually starting to collect nests because I have nests from pretty much every known urban passerine. Everything from chickadees to like warblers, because they fell out of a tree and somebody was like, I have all these baby birds. And then I'm like, no, run back as fast as you can. Find the closest tree and put it back in the tree. Doesn't matter if it's the same tree. Just put it as close to where you found it. Mom will find the babies. She won't just abandon the nest. She will abandon the nest if she can't find the nest. She will look for a solid 5 hours for most species. They will look like crazy for their nest. But if the nest is picked up and moved away, she'll just give up on it and just assume that it's completely gone or a predator got it. Which, in all fairness, a predator did get it. A predator of compassion called us. Sorry, that was a bad joke. As you can see, do not take nest inside and return it the next day. Never do that. Return the nest the day of, as fast as you can. The reason I make a big remark about this is because, as great as it sounds to bring a nest to a rehabber, the current success rate for nesting and fledgling birds in a rehab facility is 30% mortality. That means it doesn't actually gets worse actually, because it's 30% mortality, 39% euthanasia, and only about a tiny percent chance of getting them out and about. We got like a 21% chance of getting them back into the wild. With those odds, mom does such a better job than we can ever do, or even try to do. There's some amazing rehab facilities that are doing off the charts work, but the national average is still 30% of birds that come into a clinic will die. And especially, and a lot of that is literally, this is just fledgling data. So this is all just baby birds. So again, there's also this thing that after we release them, we don't know how thrifty they are, because with those flocking birds, we assume that they do well because we've let them loose, but no one's ever followed a bird throughout its lifespan except in a couple cases to know exactly how they're going. And if we can go anything from like the geese research, as well as the sandhill crane researches that have been done, as well as the raptor research that have been done, some birds are very good at being independent their entire lives, like Swainson hawks, fledglings, they can just fly and be like, I am just back to normal. Versus like if you try to do that with a Canada goose or a duck, you have a duck that follows you around everywhere. Or Lord knows, tried to do it with a pigeon. We have a pigeon named Steve. Steve was one that I raised from a chick this year, and he imprinted on me by accident. I tried to avoid it as hard as I could. He now lives in the back of the clinic and stares at us every morning for food. He would be a good ambassador animal, but I can't catch him again. He's too smart for that. Okay, Sylvester and Tweety, cat attacks. Cats kill 2.4 billion birds annually in the United States. They are the leading cause of human-related losses aside from habitat loss. These are really bad. Cat bites are the worst thing for rehabbers in the world. I don't know what cats decided to do in their genetic chain, but they have to put the most alien bacteria in their mouth that ever existed. I will not deny that any cat bite that isn't treated, the bird or animal will die within 12 to 48 hours. That is true of rabbits. That is true of everything from rabbits to birds to reptiles. Getting bitten by a cat is a death sentence for most species on planet Earth besides cats and dogs. And us apparently, which I still haven't figured out why we don't get that issue. So when you have a cat that comes into your house that has a bird, remove that bird immediately from that cat's mouth and try to get the cat away from using it as a chew toy again. This is one of the few times where I'm like, intervention at home is great. So remember when I talked about that chlorhexidine and saline? This is where that comes into play. As soon as you find a bird that got bitten by a cat, you should be rinsing those wounds like crazy. Like, I'm talking like you should go through like a whole bottle of an 8-ounce bottle of saline per tiny bird that got bit. It's going to get the bird really wet. It's going to get the bird very cold, which isn't good, but the bacteria is going to kill it down the way. So trying to get it as clean as possible is the first priority. These are ones that if you can get into a veterinary hospital, try to do it within the first 12 hours. Because it needs antibiotics if it's ever going to have a chance. And pain meds because it's really painful. Again, most of my cat bite incidences, I end up having to euthanize or they die within 24 to 48 hours. Despite me throwing antibiotics, despite me throwing everything else, they are the most dangerous thing in the world. That's why, like, basically, as soon as you're done cleaning them, treat them like a window strike, but try to get them to a hospital or anything as fast as you can. Which is why we're going to talk about how to prevent cat attacks. This is my cat, Karina. She may look fat and happy, but she goes on these evening constitutionals with me. In the process of her going on evening constitutionals, again, this is with me watching her beside me. She has taken out 2 nuthatches, 1 chickadee, 1 snake, and a bunch of mice. Indoor cats are great. There are amazing predators. Cats are one of the most efficient mammalian predators in the world. They kill 89% of their targets. Well, I guess it's closer to 82% now, but still, when you're targeting something and hit it 82% of the time, considering that wolves only hit it 50% of the time, that's pretty impressive for them. You know? I like indoor cats. You know, they can provide stimulus indoors or through catios, right? Something where they can't interact. They can still interact with the outdoors, but they're not actively being exposed to the wildlife population. It's actually a lot healthier and safer for cats. It reduces disease risk as well as predation risk. And there's a less of chance of affecting wildlife, which I've said 1,000 times and will say again. Now, that being said, you'll meet people that are like, but I love my cat outside. It's so beneficial for them. They'll go, oh, it stays near the house. Fun fact, cats roam an average of 5 acres a night. If you do the math around here, that's a lot of territory to cover. That's a lot of wild animals that they can come into contact with. If you have somebody that really wants outdoor cats, these are kind of my key cards. Bells, always 2, never 1. Never send an outdoor cat with 1 bell on, because cats can actually silence 1 bell. They know how to make themselves quiet enough that they can turn off the 1 bell sound, but if you put 2 bells on there, they can't figure it out. So having 2 bells on a collar, great. Now you'll meet a lot of people that are like, well, bells are a very bad idea because they let predators know where the cat is. That is technically true. One of the most common things that we see with owl attacks is that owls on cats. The majority of cats that are killed by owls are cats with bells on their collar. Yeah, sorry, there's not any good news on this lecture of cats. I love cats, but there's not any good news. Obviously, spay and neuter all outdoor cats. There are 2 reasons for this. 1 is it decreases the outdoor cat population. 2, spaying and neutering a cat reduces roaming from 5 acres to 1 acre. Yep. Spayed and neutered cats only averagely move 1 acre instead of 5. Additionally, encouraging a cat to come in during the day are the most active times of wildlife. So we all know birds are most active in the morning. Your cat should be inside in the morning. We know birds are very active at dusk. Your cat should be inside at dusk. Let it out after dark if you want to, or during like the high heat of the day, but never at dawn and dusk when there's a lot of animals moving around. Hypothermia. We're coming into cold season. This is another one of the biggest ones I get, especially with southern weather changes as well as cold weather coming in. Triaging is relatively simple. Monitor weather. If you expect inclement cold weather, just know to prep your kits, get your incubator stuff out. I always have all my equipment ready to go whenever it gets cold, especially when I'm worried about hummingbirds, because hummingbirds get really affected by this. Next one is, if you know that there's a storm coming, provide shelter for outside birds. So if you have trees or things like that, make sure they have a lot of good areas for them to duck into. One of the big things that I often do, which I won't deny my landlord doesn't like, is I'll place boxes in the trees and in the bushes on the side. So there's like a nice little shading spot, you know, and I try to figure out where the wind is. And then I have a little box shelter for them rather quick. They may or may not use it, but it's there if they need it. If you found one that's like frozen and cold, the key is you want to bring it inside and slowly warm it up. If you throw it directly into your incubator or your heating area, they will go into shock because they've been too cold. So then all that blood going back into their system is going to really not do their system well. One of the things I always do, you know, it sounds weird. I have my incubator. I'm talking like everyone has an incubator, but this also works for everything else. I have my incubator outside, or I have my box outside. So that way it's the temperature of what's outside. And that way when you bring it in, it slowly warms up to room temperature and then a bit higher. And you're not trying to deal with that. How do I bring a bird that's cold inside when the house is already like 87 degrees or things like that?
No, your perch fell out. I think it's on the floor.
Hmm?
Your perch fell out of the box.
Oh, yes, it's right here. Thank you. Yeah. We do the same thing in hospitals. We just slowly warm them up. We actually use water to do it. So we have like little water baths and move them around and just kind of warm them up slowly. Okay. Part 2 questions. Sorry, part 2 was very fast. But what questions can I answer about part 2?
So you were talking about nests on the ground. Is it better to just leave it alone or try to put the whole nest back up in the tree?
Always try to put it back up in a tree unless it's a ground nesting bird, which is kind of hard to know. But if you find a nest that wasn't on the ground and all of a sudden is on the ground, it doesn't need to be high. It only needs to be about 5 to 6 feet above your head, 5 to 6 feet off the ground. So it only has to be about this tall off the ground and back up in a tree. What I actually really love, and this was created by a guy in New York, is he took blueberry containers put the nest in a blueberry container and zip tied the blueberry container to the tree. So all you had to do was put the blueberry container back up in the tree with the nest inside. Beauty about birds is you don't have to worry about passing on your scent, so you can actively pick up the nest and nothing will happen.
Ah,
Birds don't have the sense of smell to realize that there was a human there. Next question. Quiet crowd for questions. I feel like I've done my job very good, I've done my job very bad. Okay, well, we'll move on to the last part. This is just kind of a quick thing. These are my 3 things that I think that people can do in their regular everyday life to help wildlife that isn't like trying to do triage or rescue. Biggest one that I'm a big advocate is proper feeder cleaning. Who here cleans their feeders? Yeah. Okay, to those of you that clean your feeders, how often do you clean your feeders?
Hummingbird every time I go.
Hummingbird every time you fill it.
Yeah.
And what about your big bird feeders?
There's never enough things.
Every other time.
Every other time is a good answer. We recommend that technically the proper, if you're following like the American Wildlife Rehabilitators Association, they recommend cleaning a bird feeder once a week. They recommend cleaning a bird feeder with bleach and then rinsing it out and making sure there's a lot of diseases. We just talked about high path avian influenza. There's a lot of diseases that really need those feeders as clean as possible. I clean my feeders pretty often. I won't deny that I have just a big container of seed that I just dump the seed back in, clean the bird feeder, and then I put it back up. And there's just a giant container of the bleach in my backyard that I just dunk them all in once a week.
But you never take them inside into your like kitchen sink.
I personally don't, just because I have too many like wild animals that I treat. You can definitely bring it in and do it in your sink. I just don't, because I don't know what my birds over there have been exposed to, and I don't like bringing things across my sanctum of disease prevention. There's a reason I usually, much to my housemates' discontent, walk into my house with nothing but my underwear with a laundry basket out front. Because there's a lot of diseases that I come in contact with that I do not want to give to any of the animals inside my house. Yeah, so my bleach actually is in like a Tupperware container, like a big Sterilite. I just got one of those big Sterilites off of Facebook Marketplace, filled it up with partial bleach, and then I just dunk my things all the way in. I let it sit for about 5-10 minutes. I take it out, I rinse it off, and then I put the seed back in. Technically, you're supposed to put new seed in, but that gets expensive. So I have 2 buckets. I have new seed and old seed, right? So I fill it with old seed, and then when I'm all out of old seed, then I bring out the new seed. I have a very decent thing. On hummingbirds, just because I'm curious, John, what do you clean your hummingbird thing out with?
Usually something.
Ah, that is a big no-no. Yeah, soapy water is actually very bad for hummingbirds. It's actually very toxic to hummingbirds.
Okay.
So you're never supposed to use soap in any hummingbird feeder that you're cleaning. Yep, you're supposed to use hot water. And again, my personal favorite friend, bleach.
Sometimes.
Yeah, soapy water, there's a good study that actually points that soapy water can cause a lot of diseases in hummingbirds, so.
Even if you rinse them really well.
So do you dilute the bleach? Yeah.
Yes, I dilute it. So I usually do, for my hummingbird feeders, it's usually 1 to 20. If I do for my outdoor feeders, it's usually 1 to 10. If you guys know what that means, it's like doing laundry.
Tablespoon to 20 tablespoons.
You got it.
What about like your shoes and stuff you talked about?
Yeah, so I use like a 1 to 20 on the bottom of my shoes. I just made it into a spray bottle and I just have it in the back of my car. So when I go to a new trail, I just spray it on really quick and then I walk. Some people have designated hiking boots. Those are great because then you just go spray, spray, spray. You put them in the back of your car and then you walk away.
With
Sorry.
Feeders, how do you know when you've adequately rinsed them?
Yeah.
Just nose?
Nose is a big one. It actually doesn't take a lot of rinses. My rule of thumb is I like to rinse them like 3 times is usually what my go-to saying is. That's been very effective for me. Generally it doesn't matter because bleach will evaporate if it's exposed to like air. It doesn't like, it can precipitate, but that's pretty rare. Usually like if it's in dilution of water, it'll just evaporate out.
Dunk it in the bucket and then like spray it with hose to get, is that how you get the?
I dunk, I let it sit for 10 minutes, I take it out, I walk over to my hose and I just run my hose through it. For like 1 cycle, then I go to each feeder and then I go again, and then I go again. I do that relatively often. It takes a lot of time, but it's just very good for like the diseases we currently have, especially with type avian influenza. It's my big way that I'm trying to reduce it, you know, yeah.
So would that be suet feeders too, you know, the.
Yep. Suet feeders as well.
And you talked about though, an alternative to bleach would be the alcohol.
Yes, alcohol also works. If you want to do alcohol, the way that works is you actually spray on the alcohol as much as you can. So like isopropanol alcohol or some kind of rubbing alcohol. You basically spray it into a container, you let it sit and then air dry out. I use bleach because I like a little bit faster. It takes a while for alcohol to air dry. You know, it can take like 10 to 20 minutes. Usually by the time I'm done with my bleach, it takes 20 minutes. So I'm kind of like hit or miss, but you could definitely use alcohol instead.
I have read that a residue of bleach could be damaging to, particularly damaging to hummingbirds.
Yes.
When I was in Texas, we used vinegar to clean it. Is that any better or worse?
Ooh, I love vinegar for cleaning. I just have I'm just a big fan of bleach because that's just what I was trained with. But vinegar works great. Yeah, it has to be pretty high concentration of vinegar though. So down to your standard like diluted vinegar, you need like a good, I don't know what you guys use.
It was just, it might not have been concentrated enough. It was just like kitchen vinegar.
Kitchen's like 5%, I think, and then sometimes they go up to 20%.
I usually would go 20% vinegar if I was going to do it.
So sunflower seed feeders, what I usually do is I wash them with soap because they're really gunky.
Yeah.
When I get them, and then I rinse it with, I do a bleach thing that I rinse off really well.
Mhm.
So does the soap matter in that case?
No, it doesn't matter it only matters for hummingbirds. And that's just because of the way their stomachs are, because they have a very simple straight line stomach. Actually, I don't think they have a stomach, if I'm being correct. I'm looking to somebody that, I don't know if you know anatomy on that. I don't know. Trying to remember, I know vampire bats don't have a stomach. Now I'm trying to remember if hummingbirds have a stomach or not. Anyway, really quickly, habitat support. Green leafy vegetation and things like that. This is my backyard. I put fake rocks down and create little temples and things like that. I make a water feeder. I actively have like stone pathways to help for, you know, feeding ground birds and things like that. Creating different habitats is very, very nice for them. And finally, my last thing, always keep learning, always take time to learn something new, always ask questions. And that's all I had. Which brings us to the cutest fledgling owl that accidentally got hit in the head. He hit a window. He is fine now. But he did hit a window and that was his eyes when he first came in the clinic. I know we already asked a lot of questions, but this could be questions about anything in the presentation. I only have a couple minutes left because I answered questions as we were going. Liz.
Concierge, but you were talking about like going to people's houses, but so is there a number to call? I'm not that.
Oh, yeah. I don't have my business cards on me because I'm here.
It would be like that Cheyenne clinic or?
So my concierge services, actually, the phone number is 907-399-2381. So that's my concierge phone.
if you have questions or something.
You're welcome to call me. I'm very happy. I give it to everyone that brings wildlife to my clinic. They can ask me questions. I'm very happy to just text the line. I answer questions. If you have a wildlife case that you're not sure what to do with, I'm happy to guide and talk you through it. Technically, my job that I do for that is a lot more like, I go to visit people's houses that like do tarantulas and honeybees and fish that can't necessarily go to a veterinary clinic, but still need veterinary care. But I have definitely been called out to just go grab a wild animal and just walk out there and grab it and then bring it back to my clinic. So, yeah. Yes.
You do have an animal that needs care, but you can't get access to the hospital or rehab.
Oh, that is one of my personal favorite questions, and it was actually something that I was supposed to put in the slides that I must have gotten lost. So as of now, I don't know if they set it up yet, but I'm hoping that they do. Colorado State University's Wildlife Club is currently working on creating a wildlife hotline. I don't know how it's going so far. You're welcome to ask me. Again, my phone number is always open, and you're welcome to spread that phone number around. Because again, I'm happy to help wildlife in any way. Our go-to places right now for different things, kind of going through our birds. Obviously for raptors, my clinic is great. We prefer to take birds from Wyoming, otherwise they're kind of illegally crossing state lines with a raptor. Or Rocky Mountain Raptor Program is two great resources for raptors. For songbirds, currently the resources we have available are Greenwood Animal Rescue down in, which is very far away, and NoCo Wildlife, which sometimes does songbirds, sometimes doesn't, depending on their capacity. We need more rehabbers. I won't deny that I have my own personal opinion about the Hughes bill, if you can't figure out which one mine is. Because we need larger rehab facilities, because we are seeing more issues with human involvement. You know, we're encroaching on wildlife, wildlife's encroaching on us. We've created / perpetrated some of wildlife's biggest issues. High path avian influenza, we're always talking about being wild birds, but the fact of the matter is that our chicken population played a big role in how it came here. And it played a big role in how it got spread, because wild birds came into contact with chickens and, you know, yeah. Yeah, I'm a big fan of, we need more wildlife rehabbers. Talking about like at-home care, the big websites I like is there's the International Society for Wildlife Rehabbers, has a lot of great care sheets for different species. The other one that I like, this is gonna sound really weird, but American Zoos and Aquariums website. Because they do all the housing for different species in zoos and aquariums, and they have all the guidelines. They publish a national guideline for every animal in captivity every year. It's great. You can find pretty much any species on planet Earth that you want to know about how to care for, from pandas all the way to like salamanders. So, again, if you start dealing with like trying to treat birds in your house, I won't deny that even as my veterinary experience is not as vast as others, that I have missed calls on certain things that other people have picked up. You know, like there are things that I miss that somebody else noticed. But trying to do it at home is really, really hard when you're trying to be a doctor at home. It's like being your own doctor. You're kind of like, okay, what am I looking for? What am I seeing? Again, those are my big websites I like. You're welcome to reach out to me. I usually respond within about 20 to 30 minutes of any call to my phone, unless I'm actively in a clinic case doing other work. But yeah, I think that's all the time I really had, but are there any questions more?
So I had one episode, like 3 weeks ago. I was coming home after an overnight shift, as a caregiver. And I saw a Canada goose limping, and it was over by the veterinarian hospital emergency on 734 Lemay. And I went in there and I said, you help? And they said, no, we only treat cats and dogs and things.
Correct.
And
So,
They gave me a number to call, but I kind of tried to follow the blues. It was kind of going around. I mean, it was getting around, but it was kind of isolated and limping. And then as I drove to the back area there, I saw a bunch of other Canada geese, and then I did see that the injured or hurt one did join his friends, and that all I could do or did do.
that's understandable. That's quite enough, actually. You know, as long as they're just limping, a lot of times they can get through that. Limping is a pretty good injury, because it means that they're not fully broken. They can actually are on the healing process. Talking about veterinarians that see wildlife here in Fort Collins, their like short and quick answer is there's none of them. CSU won't see a wildlife. I think I'm one of the few weirdos that will come and collect wildlife and see them. We have a couple veterinarians that go to NOCO Wildlife and a couple that go to the well, actually, no, CSU goes to the Raptor Center. But yeah, there's not a lot of veterinarians that'll take wild animals. One is because of our liability is so risky. Because we can't deal with the spread from wild animals to the domestic patients that we see. Again, my clinic is very unique. I think we're actually the only clinic in Wyoming that sees wildlife. At least that's what I've been told by the people that have driven 6 hours to come to my clinic. And I brought like a heron in the back of their car for 6 hours. And I was like, that's a long drive for a great blue heron. And then I have to figure out how to get it back. You can get it there and then I have to release it back in the general location because it's kind of rude to release it. Be like, hey, I know you drove 6 hours here and welcome to Cheyenne. Good luck at Lions Park. Yeah, there's been a couple of those that I've been like, are you sure you want? I had one person go all the way from, and I still don't know how they did it or why they did it. They accidentally hit a raptor outside of Tetons. And instead of going to the Teton Raptor Program Center, which is right next to Teton National Park, they somehow decided to drive all the way to me on their vacation for me to send them to Rocky Mountain Raptor Program afterwards with a letter saying, this bird's good for transport. The saddest part about that, it was a fledgling Swainson's hawk that was just fledgling and didn't actually have any injuries. She thought it got hit by a car because it was on the side of the road. It was literally just learning how to fly.
Yeah.
I have great stories. I have a friend of mine that has the best rehab. Sorry, I have one last story, John. I know you.
Last story.
One last story. This is my favorite wildlife rehab story, and it's not mine. It's from one of my old bosses back when I was working in South Africa. So he has in his office a stuffed baby elephant, like that taxidermy baby elephant. And I was like, did you get permission to hunt that? He goes, no, it is the world's saddest story. So I always have it here. So that way people can ask me about it. I'm like, okay, what exactly happened? He goes, well, no offense to you Americans, but you don't understand wildlife. So this baby elephant was being hunted by a pride of lions. The lions had managed to separate the baby elephant from the mother, which is an impressive feat for lions. That's a lot of hunting work. Only for as my friend puts it, a large American-style truck slamming into one of the lions, American tourists jumping out, grabbing the baby elephant and throwing it in the back of the truck. And instead of driving it to the mother elephant, they drove it to the rehab center without calling the rehab center or the Kruger Park Rangers. So they stole from a national park to rescue a wonderful baby elephant that later died from all the injuries from the lion bites because lions are cats and cat bacteria is horrible. There you go, John.
On that cheery note, join me in thanking Nolan for a very informative presentation. I hope we'll see all of you again, second Thursday in October, October 9th, I think it is. And until then, thanks for coming out. It's great to see you. Yep, there's more cookies. We have the room for 10 more minutes.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.